Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to this evening's episode of Reporter's Notebook. I almost said What the Politics because I am joined by my co-host of What the Politics, Miss Emily. Hello, how are you?
Hey, long time no see.
Right, yes. I love having the opportunity to talk to you, even via Zoom, because we both work from home, so we don't get to catch up as much as I wish we could. But on
Yeah.
Tuesdays, we do get to hang out because we record our podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do.
So that's the reason that I have you on this evening's edition of Reporter's Notebook, because I want to talk about our podcast and what our topic was for today. So can you tell our viewers what we talked about today?
Definitely. So today was a really interesting topic. We got to speak to a cybersecurity expert out of DC, and he kind of was talking about the rise of extremist groups here in our country and how that relates to cybersecurity, how they're using, social media platforms to gain traction with these extremist groups. And on the other, flip side of that, how cybersecurity intelligence agencies, as well as, the FBI, are able to track down these people a little easier, possibly due to the fact that social media is giving them these platforms to, say what they want to say and rally groups and things like that. And, a pretty good example of that would kind of be how after, the January 6th, storming of the Capitol, the FBI was kind of able to use social media to track down some of these people by tracking the posts that they had been posting, the weeks leading up to the insurrection and et cetera. So it's very interesting topic we had today. And
Yeah.
we also have a kind of like special edition little extra podcast we're throwing in there tonight for you guys as well. That's on the same track as cybersecurity, but a little more on the side of, personal cybersecurity and how you're able to protect your own devices, protect yourself from cybersecurity hackers as well. So little dipping our toes in a little, two little pools there for today.
Right, yeah, and I think one of the things that interested me when it came to this topic, number one, the Department of Homeland Security issued a security advisory or bulletin talking about how domestic extremism is on the rise, and for local authorities to be aware of extremist activities and to have pretty much action plans to disrupt any sort of activities, and then also kind of relating the idea of federal agencies, government officials, whether or not they're working together or if there are some sort of roadblocks between the two, and then also dipping a little bit into deplatforming and talking about how social
Yeah.
media plays a role in some of these activities and planning around them, and very, very, I wish we had so much more time to talk about this topic, because even though it's this podcast is called What the Politics, there are a lot of federal agencies involved in cybersecurity, and then also kind of trying to talking to our cybersecurity expert that we had on our podcast about where the United States lies in regards to other countries when it comes to our
Mhm.
cybersecurity and infrastructure and gathering intelligence and all sorts of cool things. He just seems to have like a really, really cool job. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't
We
know.
we dove a little into, his professional opinion on the this past election and the, security and fairness of that. So it was a really good conversation. We kind of dove into a couple different topics there.
Mhm. And so right before I wrap up this evening's edition of Reporter's Notebook, I have one question for you about today's topic. What was your favorite idea or kind of point that we talked about?
Hmm.
It's
That's a good
hard,
question.
right? Yeah,
It is
because it
hard,
was really
but
interesting. Everything was
it,
really cool.
it really was. But I gotta say, kind of what I mentioned before, just the talking about social media and how, that's kind of helping the rise of these extremist groups. But at the same time, it's also, these platforms are also defunding them or knocking them off. And it's also giving, these security agencies more access to these people. So I just thought that aspect is really interesting to me, how social media, and we've talked about social media in a few of our podcasts and how it relates to the different topics we're discussing. Oh my goodness. And it's just so fascinating to me how social media just has played such a significant role in every aspect of our lives, since the start of it or the development of it. It blows my mind, really. Social media is just crazy to me.
Maybe that should be one of our topics coming up, about
It
how
really should.
like government interference, federal interference in regards to social media, because it seems like social media is becoming sort of
Mhm.
the fifth estate. We talk about, the
Yeah.
government, like the three different estates, and then of course journalism being the fourth estate, checking the powers of the government,
Mhm.
the branch of the government. But now it's kind of like social media seems to be its own sort of, I don't even know what to call it. Like, how would we define
Yeah,
social media in regards to how much power it has and how it can be checked by the government? It's very interesting. We could
definitely.
definitely do a podcast about that.
We really
And
should. That's a great idea because I feel like in so many podcast topics that we've had, we touch on social media a lot. So I feel like a whole podcast dedicated to it. Like we could go on and on about that. That would be a good one.
yes. And so I want to hear from our listeners to the podcast, to the people who are watching this right now. What do you think we should have experts on? I mean, maybe I'm already starting to think about what kind of experts we need to have for our next podcast. And we just finished recording this one. And yeah, so I want to hear from people whether or not you think we should have experts on in regards to social media policies, and what kind of checks they should have in government. So thank you so much,
Definitely.
Emily. I'm going to wrap up this edition of Reporter's Notebook because you and I both still have a lot of work to do. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this edition of Reporter's Notebook. And of course, you can always listen to What the Politics at WNCT.com in the features tab. And you got to go to the WNCT Podcast Network and then click What the Politics. There's a sports podcast, but we know you're there for What the Politics. All right, thank you so much, Emily, for joining me, and I want to wish everyone a wonderful Tuesday evening. All right, good night, y'all.